That summer, at the tender age of 18, Valentina believed she had finally reached the light at the end of a long, silent tunnel. For 2 years, she had admired Carlos from the shadows, watching him laugh, move, and breathe, always out of reach. And then, one night, he turned to her not just with words, but with fire in his eyes and hands that trembled with desire. He kissed her with intensity, whispered things that made her heart race, and led her into a world she had only dreamed about. There was pain, yes, but she embraced it, mistaking it for love. In the silence after their bodies stopped moving, she lay beside him, feeling whole for the first time. But reality has a cruel habit of revealing itself when you least expect it. The next morning, she passed by a classroom and heard laughter loud, shameless, and familiar. Not bad, huh? The prettiest girl in class. Was it her first time? One of Carlos's friends chuckled. Valentina stopped in her tracks, blood draining from her face. Then came Carlos's voice, so casual it felt like a slap. Actually, I wanted to go after the school beauty, but I was worried she'd think I was inexperienced. So I had to practice on Valentina first. In that instant, her world tilted. Her knees weakened, and her heart thudded painfully against her ribs. She didn't storm in, didn't scream. She simply walked away, numb, and when she reached the admissions office, she quietly changed her university choice. From Beijing to Canton.
She didn't even know why.
Maybe to run. Maybe to hide. Maybe to forget. But forgetting isn't so simple. The voices inside that classroom kept haunting her. Another voice chimed in. Classic Carlos. Only the prettiest in class is worthy of being his intern. Like one of those noble maids serving their masters. Someone else snickered. She's a bit too skinny, though. Annoyingly so. Come on, Carlos said, laughing. It's not like she lost anything. Besides, it didn't seem like she was resisting. Their laughter grew louder, more vile. Quiet on the outside, wild in bed. Who knew? Carlos is irresistible, one of them added. He just had to reach out and take it. I bet she planned this for years. Finally got what she wanted. Every word carved itself into Valentina's skin like a branding iron. She stood outside, fists clenched, her lip bleeding from how hard she bit down to stop herself from sobbing. Then, footsteps echoed in the hallway. She fled. She ran until she locked herself in a bathroom stall and finally let go. Tears streamed down her face, her body trembling as humiliation and heartbreak consumed her. She hugged her knees, her breath short and shallow. She had given him everything. Her first kiss, her trust, her body, and he had turned her into a joke. A practice doll. Something disposable. Her phone buzzed. A message from Carlos. Take a taxi back alone today. I've got a meeting with classmates. Not convenient to bring you. She stared at it, her hands cold. Another message followed. Don't forget the morning after pill. I don't have time today. Make sure you take it. Her vision blurred. She remembered how he had whispered into her ear just hours ago, telling her it had been unexpected, that he'd buy her the pill himself, that her health mattered. She had smiled then, foolishly thinking he cared. Now everything was crystal clear. He never did. Her tears dried. Something inside her cracked, but it didn't break. She stood, washed her face, and left. She didn't dare walk into a pharmacy, so she ordered the pill online. When it arrived, she couldn't bring herself to open the door immediately. Only after several deep breaths did she retrieve the package, sit on the floor, and swallow the pill. No water. No expression. Just emptiness. She collapsed onto the carpet, her limbs weak, her eyes staring into the abyss. For 10 years, she had followed Carlos like a shadow. Her world had always revolved around him. Now the center was gone. Her identity shaken. The city lights flickered on outside, mocking her with their indifference. Hours passed, maybe days, until Alice called. Tina, why didn't you come to the party with Carlos tonight? Her best friend asked, frowning. Daniela's there. Since you're not, she's glued to him like gum. Alice turned the camera. In a dim corner, Daniela sat close to Carlos. Too close. Her short skirt and revealing top made it obvious what kind of attention she was seeking. They were whispering, laughing, their bodies leaning toward each other in a bubble of shared intimacy. Valentina watched, her heart squeezing painfully. Carlos had told her just hours earlier he was interested in Daniela. And now it was already happening. Then came the game. Truth or dare. Daniela had to do push-ups on a guy. She chose Carlos without hesitation. He lay down, smirking, and she positioned herself above him. 1 push-up.
2.
3. The room erupted with laughter and cheers. On the last push-up, Carlos accidentally collapsed onto her. They both blushed, the moment electric. And then, as if the world were watching a scripted drama, Carlos leaned in and kissed her.
Deep. Long. Passionate.
A French kiss that lasted 3 endless minutes. Valentina didn't blink. She didn't breathe. Her hands trembled, her chest burned, but no tears came. She had run out of those. What replaced them was a strange, heavy silence. Not numbness, but awareness. The kind that comes after a storm, when the destruction is clear and nothing can be undone. For the first time in her life, she saw Carlos not as the boy she loved, but as the man he truly was. Charming, calculating, careless. She was done being a footnote in someone else's story. From that moment forward, she wouldn't be the girl who followed. She would be the one who walked away. Valentina dressed with care, layering her silence like armor, while Alice, still connected through the video call, clicked her tongue in disgust. They kissed until there was a trail of saliva. She muttered before turning the camera away and stepping out of the room. Once in a quiet corner, her tone shifted into something more serious. I didn't want to hurt you, but if you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, you never would have let go. Valentina's voice came out hoarse, fractured. I don't blame you, Alice. I only blame myself for being so stupid for so many years. I believed that just because Carlos let me stay by his side, that space belonged to me. Alice sighed, clearly annoyed. What angers me most is that Carlos always knew you liked him. He kept you close, pretending he didn't notice, letting you sink deeper and deeper into this mess. She paused, then pressed. You saw what happened tonight. Just think it over. Don't let him ruin the next 4 years of your life, too. But Valentina interrupted, her voice steady and quiet. He won't. I've already made my decision. I'll go with you to University. But please, for now, keep it a secret. The moment she hung up, she opened her laptop and changed her university choice in front of Alice. No hesitation.
No second-guessing.
She submitted the application to just minutes before the deadline. Alice squealed with joy. She had been pleading for months for them to study together, but Valentina had always clung to that old promise she made to Carlos during their first year of high school: to study hard, get into university, and chase their shared dream of moving to Beijing together. That dream had always been his, not hers. She never cared for Beijing's freezing winters, nor did she feel any passion for aeronautics or technical universities. But for 3 long years, she had made it her goal. Because of him, they'd grown up side by side. Even their parents saw it as natural that one day they'd end up together. But now, she couldn't find a single reason to follow him north. In fact, after everything that had happened, the very idea of going where he would be felt like betrayal, not of him, but of herself. She needed distance. He would go north, so she would go south. That night, before going to bed, she filled the bathtub to the brim, hoping the water would wash away everything: his touch, his scent, the pain. But when she took off her clothes, the bruises remained, dark and visible against her skin. The memories surged back unwanted. The heat of his body, the way he had held her, the breath on her neck, all of it clung to her like smoke. Disgusted, she grabbed the roughest towel she could find and scrubbed herself over and over until her skin turned raw. As if pain could erase humiliation. As if rubbing hard enough could make her forget. But all it did was keep her awake, sore and broken. For the first time in 6 years since they first got their phones, Carlos didn't text her goodnight. The ritual was over.
Perhaps it was better that way.
Every habit ends. Every illusion eventually collapses. She drifted into a restless sleep, only to wake again and again. Just as she finally started to slip into deeper rest, she felt Eda's feather-light kiss on her forehead. Valentina startled awake. The first thing she saw was Carlos's jawline, his Adam's apple, the familiar scent of cedarwood he always wore. But there was something else now, a faint trace of lemon. Carlos leaned in, smirking softly. Why so shy, She turned her head, panic rising, trying to push him away, but he slipped under the blanket in one swift motion, wrapping his arms around her like nothing had changed. What's with the attitude? You didn't even say goodnight last night. You turned your phone off. Now you're avoiding me? His voice was playful, almost scolding. I even went for a run this morning to buy your favorite crab buns. Do you want to eat them while they're hot, or should I eat first? His breath grazed her ear, and his hand began to wander again. But the fog in her mind vanished. She fought back hard, struggling against his grip, but she was no match for his strength. At 5 feet 3 inches, she couldn't overpower someone like Carlos. Why, she gasped. You already have Daniela. Why are you still doing this? He ignored her question, holding her tighter. What is this? A tantrum because I didn't take you to the party? Let me guess, your best friend ratted me out? It was just a stupid game. Are you jealous? Her silence was louder than any scream. He chuckled, pressing his face into the crook of her neck. You're always like this. The moment I talk to another girl, you get like this. Something inside her snapped. A switch flipped. Her memories suddenly recalled the defense lessons from military class. Without thinking, she raised her knee with all her strength. Carlos groaned and loosened his grip just enough. She pushed him off and jumped from the bed, throwing on a jacket over her pajamas and fleeing to the living room. She wasn't going to share another minute with him in the same room. A few moments later, Carlos followed, rubbing his ribs, clearly annoyed but not angry. By the way, he muttered, you took the pill yesterday, right? Don't cause any trouble. I wouldn't know how to explain it to your parents. He grabbed a glass of soy milk from the table and handed it to her. Here, drink something before you start your drama. You know your stomach's weak.
She didn't take the glass.
Didn't move. Carlos's hand hovered for a moment, then dropped, his voice rising in frustration. What's going on with you now? Even to throw a tantrum, you need a reason and a limit. Her eyes met his, cold and steady. I'm not worthy. His face darkened instantly. Without warning, he slammed the glass down onto the table, hard enough to shatter the lid. Soy milk spilled across the carpet, but Valentina didn't flinch. She didn't need to anymore. The storm inside her had already passed, the moment Valentina stepped off the plane and into the warm breeze of the American summer. It felt like someone had gently peeled a layer of grief off her chest. The unfamiliar sky stretched endlessly above her, and for the first time in what felt like years, she could breathe without the weight of memories clinging to every breath. Her aunt welcomed her with open arms, and even though her smile couldn't erase the heaviness inside, it offered a quiet comfort she didn't know she needed. In the first few days, Valentina kept herself busy organizing bookshelves, helping in the garden, going for long walks around the neighborhood. She told herself it was just to stay helpful, but deep down she knew she was afraid of what silence might say if she ever stopped moving. Nights were the hardest. She would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Carlos had even noticed she was gone. Was he still with Daniela? Were they somewhere cold and blue in New Zealand, taking pictures for a storybook romance she was never going to be part of? Sometimes the questions came uninvited. Other times, she caught herself reaching for her phone before remembering she had blocked him, erased him, deleted every trace. One evening, after helping her aunt cook dinner, her cousin Lily invited her to join a local volunteer group. It was mostly college students organizing summer reading sessions for kids. Valentina hesitated, then nodded. Anything was better than being alone with her thoughts. The first time she stood in front of a room full of energetic, noisy children, she panicked. But something shifted when a shy little girl with oversized glasses clung to her sleeve and asked if she could read the next page. Valentina's heart softened. Day by day, she began to rebuild herself through their innocent laughter. The children didn't know who Carlos was. They didn't care how broken she had been. To them, she was just Miss Tina, the girl with the soft voice and patient smile. And, to her own surprise, that was enough. One afternoon, after a particularly chaotic session involving finger paint and spilled juice, Lily handed her a popsicle and nudged her toward a bench under the trees. "You've changed," Lily said casually, licking her own treat. "When you got here, you looked like you were made of glass. Now you look like someone who might fight back." Valentina laughed quietly, the sound unfamiliar in her own ears. "Maybe I finally realized I'm allowed to matter," she replied. That night, she sat by the window, watching the fireflies flicker across the lawn. Her phone buzzed. A friend request. From Carlos. No name, no message, just the request. Her fingers hovered over the screen. For a split second, her old instinct stirred. Maybe he missed her. Maybe he regretted it. But then she remembered Daniela's post, the matching breakfast, the way he slammed the glass, the venom in his voice when she said she wasn't worthy. And worst of all, the look on his face when he picked Daniela's hand and walked left without ever once turning back. Valentina locked the screen without accepting. She got up, pulled the curtains shut, and went to bed early. She didn't cry. She didn't think. She just let the quiet of the room cradle her. Weeks passed. Her skin regained color. Her shoulders loosened. She began preparing for college in Wong with Alice. The two would exchange messages, packing tips, little jokes about dorm life. One evening, Alice texted her a photo of their future campus. "Can you believe this will be us in a month?" Valentina stared at the sun-drenched buildings, tall trees lining the main quad, groups of students lounging in the grass. For the first time, she smiled without hesitation. Yes, she thought. This will be us. But just as things began to settle, life, as always, had other plans. One morning, while helping her aunt organize old boxes in the garage, she found an envelope tucked into the corner of a dusty drawer. It had her name on it. Curious, she opened it and inside was a handwritten letter, dated almost 3 years ago. The handwriting was familiar. Her chest tightened. It was from Carlos. Before she could read a single line, her aunt peeked in. "Oh, that? Carlos sent it through your mom years ago. It must have gotten misplaced. You two are so close, I figured it was nothing urgent." Valentina's hands trembled as she held the letter. She sat down on the steps, heart pounding, and began to read. And with every line, her world started to unravel all over again. Valentina stared at the phone long after the call ended, the screen dark but her mind spinning. Carlos's voice, still so familiar, echoed in her head, a mixture of blame, doubt, and subtle guilt-tripping, wrapped in the same entitled tone he had always used when things didn't go his way. But what hit harder than his words was the way his mother had spoken to her with such warmth, such assumption that everything was still as it had always been. As if she and Carlos were still inseparable, still destined, still promised to each other. Valentina didn't have the heart to correct her. After all, Auntie had always treated her with kindness, almost like a second daughter. But the weight of keeping up that illusion, of being polite when all she wanted was distance, left her emotionally drained. She stood up from the edge of her bed, walked to the window, and looked out at the foreign city she had come to call temporary home. The sun was beginning to set, painting the rooftops with a soft amber glow. Her heart should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. It fluttered with unresolved tension. That night, she didn't sleep well. Carlos's call had stirred emotions she thought she'd locked away. The fact that he still had the nerve to ask why she hadn't contacted him, after everything, was almost laughable. And yet, a small part of her, buried beneath layers of pain and logic, still reacted to his voice. Still remembered how he used to call her Tina with that teasing tone, how he once promised to build rockets and take her to the moon. But that Carlos, the one she had loved, admired, followed blindly was not the one who had slammed a glass against the table, belittled her feelings, or casually replaced her with someone else. No, the real Carlos was the one who had treated her like an option. And she refused to be one anymore. The next morning, Valentina ignored her phone. She buried herself in chores, helped her aunt cook, folded laundry, and even repotted some dying plants. Anything to silence the storm inside. But by evening, Alice had sent a message. "Val, guess what? I saw Carlos post a game's back. And Daniela still stuck to him like glue." Valentina didn't reply. She didn't want to feed the cycle. Instead, she opened her email. And there it was, her acceptance letter. She had officially been admitted to university in Wang. A new chapter. A place far from Beijing, far from Carlos, far from everything she had once mistaken for love. She closed her eyes and allowed herself a deep breath. This was her chance. Her clean slate. But the universe wasn't done testing her. 2 days later, while grocery shopping with her aunt, Valentina ran into an old classmate. Lila, someone she hadn't seen in over a year. "Tina? Oh my God, it's really you." Lila rushed up and hugged her without hesitation. "Wow, I saw your post months ago. You and Carlos were like the dream couple. Everyone was saying you'd probably get married after college." But now her voice trailed off, and she looked uncomfortable. "I mean, I heard some stuff, but you know how rumors are." Valentina smiled politely. "We're not together anymore." Lila blinked. "Really? I just saw his story. Yesterday was with Daniela again." Valentina nodded, her face unreadable. "I know." That night, back home, she lay on the couch, eyes fixed on the ceiling. All the whispers, all the unsolicited updates, all the posts and screenshots they followed her like shadows. She didn't seek them out, but somehow they always found their way to her. Carlos was still everywhere, and that, more than anything, made her realize she had never really left him.
Not yet.
Not emotionally. Not truly. The physical distance was real, but her mind, her heart was still chained to the past. And she was tired of it. The next day, she sat down with a pen and paper. She began to write, not to Carlos, not to anyone else, but to herself. A letter of goodbye. She wrote about the girl she used to be, the way she had loved without reservation, the years she had spent being someone's shadow. She wrote about the pain, the humiliation, the silence that followed the betrayal. She wrote about the anger, yes, but also the hope, the way she was slowly learning to stand on her own. When she finished, she folded the letter and placed it in her journal. A symbolic burial. That night, her phone rang again. A different number. No caller ID. She let it ring. Then silence. Then a message. "Tina, I'm outside. I need to see you." Her breath caught.
She didn't respond.
A second message. "I know I messed up. Just give me 5 minutes. I brought something I need to return to you." She walked slowly to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer through. There he was, Carlos, standing by a rented car, hands in his pockets, looking as if the world had chewed him up and spit him out. But she didn't open the door. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Valentina forced a smile as she nodded politely at Carlos's mother, but her heart felt like it was slowly curling inward. The warmth in Annie's voice, the casualness in the way she spoke about tomorrow as if everything was the same, as if Valentina and Carlos were still what they used to be, made her feel like she was watching someone else's life play out around her, a life she no longer belonged to. The banquet hall glowed with soft golden lights. Laughter floated in the air. Glasses clinked, and distant music played, but none of it reached her. All she could hear was Carlos's voice in the hallway, still echoing in her mind. "As long as I can always go home, there's no problem enjoying the scenery elsewhere." The words repeated like a cruel mantra, laced with arrogance, as if her love, her loyalty, her presence had been nothing but a safety net to him. She remembered how she used to chase after him with the smallest excuse, how she used to check her phone every few minutes just in case he messaged her, how she waited silently for every stolen glance, every fleeting smile. And now, standing among people who still thought they were meant to be, Valentina felt like she had shed that old skin but hadn't yet grown a new one. Her fingers curled tightly around the edge of the plate in front of her, knuckles pale. When she could no longer bear the weight of staying, she excused herself quietly and slipped away to the restroom. Inside, the silence was sharper. She stood before the mirror, staring at her reflection plain, tired, exposed. Not because she lacked makeup or a proper dress, but because she felt like everything she had built in the past few weeks was being tested, challenged, provoked. She splashed cold water on her face, inhaled deeply, and whispered to herself, "You are not going back." Just as she was about to leave, she heard the door open. Daniela walked in. Her silver heels clicked softly against the tile, and her reflection appeared beside Valentina's in the mirror, glowing, confident, every strand of her hair in place. "Valentina," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "I'm glad you came tonight. Honestly, I wasn't sure you would." Valentina didn't respond, just turned to dry her hands. Daniela leaned slightly against the sink, her voice light. "You must have heard what Carlos said earlier. He always jokes too much when he's around the guys, but he's not a bad person. It's just hard to be young and know what you want right away, you know?" Her tone was gentle, even kind, but beneath it, Valentina could hear the condescension. Daniela was trying to comfort her while simultaneously marking her territory. "You and Carlos have so much history. Honestly, if it were me, I would have found it hard to let go, too." Valentina looked at her calmly and said, "You don't have to worry. I'm not here for him." Daniela blinked, a little caught off guard. "Oh, of course. I didn't mean, I'm here because my parents brought me. I didn't know this party was happening until I was already in the car." Valentina's voice was even, but her gaze was sharp. "I'm not fighting for anyone. Not anymore." For a second, something flickered in Daniela's eyes, but she quickly recovered with a graceful smile. "I respect that," she said and walked out. Valentina followed a few minutes later, calmer now. She knew she had nothing to prove. She walked back into the banquet hall and headed straight for her parents, whispering that she wasn't feeling well and wanted to leave early. They looked at her with concern but didn't press her, and within minutes they were back in the car. As the city lights blurred past the window, Valentina leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Her parents chatted softly in the front seats, unaware of the storm slowly quieting inside her. She wasn't broken. She was shedding. The next morning, she packed her things methodically. Her flight to Wong was in 2 days, and she wanted to arrive early to settle in. When her parents asked if she was sure she didn't want to visit Carlos before leaving, she just smiled and said she'd already said everything she needed to. The day of her departure came with rain. Not heavy, but steady enough to blur the streets and soften the edges of the city. At the airport, she hugged her parents tightly. "Take care of yourself," her mother whispered. "And remember, don't let anyone treat you like a backup plan." Valentina nodded, eyes shimmering, but her voice was steady. "I won't." She boarded the plane alone. No Carlos, no dramatic goodbyes, no lingering regrets. Just her and a suitcase full of everything she had left of herself, ready to begin again. As the plane ascended, she looked out the window. The city grew smaller, the clouds thickened, and the weight in her chest finally began to lift. She didn't know what the future in Wong would hold. Maybe it would be lonely. Maybe it would be messy. But it would be hers. Valentina's days in Guangdong began with quiet mornings and unfamiliar sounds, the rustling of banana leaves outside her dorm window, the distant buzz of scooters in the alley below, and the occasional chatter of students calling each other for breakfast. At first, it all felt foreign, like she had stepped into a life that didn't quite belong to her. But maybe that was exactly what she needed. A life that wasn't shared. A life that didn't echo with memories of someone else. Her roommates were friendly but busy, and that suited her just fine. She joined a literature club and a beginner's photography workshop, not because she was particularly passionate, but because she needed to move, to be surrounded by things that didn't remind her of Carlos. Every evening, she walked through campus alone, breathing in the scent of flowering osmanthus and listening to the cicadas hum their endless songs. With every step, the weight of her past loosened a little more. One afternoon, while browsing the library for a book she'd forgotten the title of, she bumped into a boy with messy hair, glasses sliding down his nose, and a camera bag slung across his chest. Their books scattered to the floor. "Sorry," they both said at the same time. They laughed, the sound unexpectedly light. His name was Ian, a second-year media student with a dry sense of humor and a habit of quoting movie lines in the middle of conversations. At first, Valentina kept her distance. She was polite, responsive, but always guarded. Yet Ian didn't seem to mind. He never pried, never pushed. He simply showed up sometimes at the library, sometimes in the photography room, and once by complete coincidence, in the same group project. Slowly, she grew used to his presence. They shared notes, traded playlists, and started walking together after class. One evening, he handed her a Polaroid. It was a picture he had secretly taken of her during a club outing, her profile framed by sunset light, wind blowing strands of hair across her cheek. "You look like someone who's about to fly," he said simply. She didn't reply. But later, in her dorm, she slipped the photo between the pages of her journal, right where the goodbye letter to Carlos had once been. That same week, she found out through a classmate that Carlos and Daniela had broken up shortly after the semester started.
No one knew why.
Apparently, Carlos had changed. He skipped lectures, showed up to parties uninvited, and seemed to drift without direction. Valentina listened without reacting. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel pity. She felt nothing. And that nothing was everything. Months passed. Typhoon season came and went. Valentina learned to cook simple dishes in the dorm kitchen, taught herself how to budget, and finally learned how to kill cockroaches without screaming. Her hair grew longer. Her laugh returned. On her birthday, her roommates surprised her with a tiny cake and a song in 3 different accents. That night, Ian walked her to the dorm gate and handed her a small gift wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a notebook. On the first page, he had scribbled, "For the stories you haven't lived yet." She looked up at him, unsure what to say. He just smiled and added, "You've changed a lot. But that's not a bad thing." She didn't kiss him. She wasn't ready. But when she said goodnight, her smile was genuine. She was no longer running away from the past. She was walking towards something new, even if she didn't know what it was yet. The next morning, as she sipped coffee on the campus steps, the wind carried a faint scent of winter flowers, unfamiliar but sweet. She looked up at the sky, not searching for signs or answers, just feeling the sun on her face. For the first time in a long time, Valentina wasn't waiting for anyone to message her. She wasn't checking anyone's feed. She wasn't missing anyone's voice. She was simply here. Present. Whole. The girl who once measured her worth by someone else's attention had quietly, without fanfare, grown her own wings. Carlos's eyes narrowed as he looked Santiago up and down, as if trying to assess whether he was a real threat or just a passing presence. Santiago, though clearly a little nervous, stood firm beside Valentina. His shoulders were squared, his voice steady, and his hand, while not touching hers, hovered just close enough to make a point. Valentina, meanwhile, remained perfectly calm, as if this confrontation were just another mild breeze on an otherwise sunny day. She turned to Santiago with a smile that held genuine warmth. "Thank you. I almost forgot we had that lunch meeting." Santiago smiled back, his eyes flickering with relief. Carlos's jaw tightened. "So this is how it is now," he muttered. "You don't even give me 10 minutes?" Valentina looked at him, without flinching. "Carlos, you showed up without telling me. I'm not obligated to drop everything because you decided to appear." Her voice was neither cold nor harsh, it was simply factual. Neutral. The kind of tone people use when they've finally let go of anger because there's nothing left to protect. Carlos opened his mouth as if to argue, but then closed it again. His hand, still gripping the strap of his backpack, trembled slightly. "I just wanted to see you," he said after a pause. "You look different." That's what happens when people grow, she replied. They change. The silence stretched. Santiago shifted uncomfortably, but didn't leave her side. After a moment, Valentina turned to him. Let's go. The cafeteria closes early on Fridays. Santiago gave Carlos a quick nod, more out of politeness than recognition, then walked with her toward the courtyard. Carlos stood there, unmoving, watching them walk away, his expression unreadable. As soon as they were out of earshot, Santiago let out a breath he'd been holding. Sorry, he said. I didn't mean to interfere. It looked tense. Valentina smiled. No need to apologize. You did exactly what I needed. Which was a reason not to look back. Santiago blinked, then chuckled softly. Well, if you need more of that, I'm free every day after class. Lunch that day was lighthearted. They talked about everything except Carlos. Santiago told her about his odd part-time job taking photos of pets for online adoption, and Valentina shared how she accidentally entered a cooking contest on campus and ended up winning second place for her spicy noodles. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she had to censor herself, didn't feel like she was walking on emotional eggshells. Over the next few weeks, Santiago slowly became a part of her routine. Not in a rushed, romantic way, more like the quiet presence of a tree that's always there when you need shade. He didn't ask too many questions. He didn't push. He just listened, offered her coffee when she looked tired, shared silly memes, and once lent her his coat during a surprise thunderstorm. And when he found out she hated cockroaches, he promised, half joking, to be her pest control hotline forever. Carlos, meanwhile, faded. Occasionally, Valentina would hear from old classmates that he had returned to Beijing, that he'd been seen at clubs or had switched majors again. She didn't react. It wasn't her story anymore. The last thread that tied them had been cut at the campus gate. On the day of her midterm presentation, Valentina stood in front of the class, explaining her photography project about growth and transformation. Her final slide showed a Polaroid of a single flower growing between cracks in the pavement. Sometimes, she said, what survives isn't what's planted in the right place. It's what refuses to stop growing. Her professor clapped softly. Her classmates followed. And in the corner, Santiago winked. That evening, she went to her favorite rooftop spot on Campusa quiet terrace that overlooked the city skyline. Santiago brought 2 drinks, handed her one, and sat beside her. You know, he said, I think you're stronger than you think. Valentina looked at the horizon, the buildings painted gold by the sunset. Maybe, she said, but I didn't do it alone. He glanced sideways. Is that your way of saying thank you? She laughed. Maybe. Don't get used to it. They sat in silence for a while. Not awkward, just peaceful. And in that moment, Valentina realized that healing didn't always come with grand declarations or sudden epiphanies. Sometimes, it came with quiet afternoons, with a voice that didn't rush you, with eyes that saw you without expectations. That night, as she walked back to her dorm, her phone buzzed with a message. It was Santiago. Next week, the pet shelter's having a picnic event. Wanna come? I promise no cockroaches. She smiled, typed back. You're on.
Valentina no volvió la vista atrás mientras se alejaba del río. Sus pasos eran firmes, no por falta de emociones, sino porque cada palabra que había dicho le había quitado un peso de encima. Durante años había vivido bajo la sombra de un amor que creía eterno, pero que no era más que una jaula disfrazada de promesa. Ahora, con el corazón en calma, sabía que no necesitaba seguir encerrada. Santiago le apretó suavemente la mano, su calor le devolvió una tranquilidad nueva, diferente, que no quemaba como el fuego del pasado, sino que abrazaba como un sol de primavera. Subieron juntos al tren ligero que los llevaba de regreso al campus, y mientras el vagón se deslizaba por la ciudad, Valentina apoyó la cabeza en su hombro. Afuera, las luces pasaban como recuerdos, fugaces, inofensivos. ¿Te sientes mejor?, preguntó él con voz baja. Ella asintió, cerrando los ojos. Sí. Por fin estoy en paz. Pasaron los días, y Carlos desapareció de su vida sin dejar rastro. No volvió a aparecer por Guangdong ni a enviar mensajes, como si aquel adiós junto al río hubiese sido el cierre definitivo. Valentina no preguntó más. No quería saber. Ya no dolía. En su lugar, llenó su vida de nuevas rutinas, clases que de verdad le interesaban, proyectos que despertaban su curiosidad, amigos que reían con ella sin esperar nada a cambio. Santiago se convirtió en una constante, no en un salvador, sino en un compañero que caminaba a su lado sin empujar ni jalar. Celebraron juntos su cumpleaños, cocinaron ramen en su dormitorio durante la lluvia de abril, se tomaron fotos tontas con filtros de gatitos y leyeron poesía bajo las bugambilias del campus. Fue así como Valentina entendió que el amor no es una tormenta que arrasa, sino una brisa que sostiene. En una tarde de otoño, cuando el cielo comenzaba a tornarse dorado y el aire olía a hojas secas, recibió una carta de su madre. No tenía nada extraordinario. Solo hablaba del gato nuevo en casa, de que el árbol del jardín ya estaba dando mandarinas, y que Carlos se había transferido a una universidad extranjera. Parece que necesitaba un cambio de aire, decía la carta. Valentina sonrió levemente. No respondió. No tenía nada que decir. Esa misma noche, mientras caminaban de regreso de la biblioteca, Santiago se detuvo en medio del sendero. Valentina, ¿puedo preguntarte algo?
Ella lo miró curiosa. Claro.
Él respiró hondo. Si algún día dejo de gustarte, me lo dirás con esa misma sinceridad con la que dejaste ir a Carlos. Ella no respondió de inmediato. En lugar de eso, entrelazó sus dedos con los de él y sonrió. Si eso llegara a pasar, te lo diría. Porque aprendí que el amor no es aferrarse. Es elegir, cada día, con libertad y verdad. Santiago se echó a reír, fingiendo estar herido. Vaya, eso fue poético y aterrador al mismo tiempo. Tú preguntaste, replicó ella, riendo. Y en ese momento, bajo la luna que apenas asomaba entre las nubes, Valentina supo que todo había valido la pena. No por lo que perdió, sino por lo que encontró dentro de sí misma. Porque al final, no se trataba de Carlos, ni de Santiago, ni siquiera de promesas rotas. Se trataba de volver a elegir su vida, con todo lo que eso implicaba. Y mientras caminaban juntos hacia los dormitorios, sin prisa, sin miedo, el viento cálido del sur acariciaba su rostro como una bendición silenciosa. Así cerraba el ciclo. No con una gran despedida, sino con un simple estoy bien, susurrado al universo que, por fin, comenzaba a escucharla.